He's
Yeah,
done
yes.
C2E2, New York Comic Con.
Cool.
And we're looking to get into general content now that starts to cross over a little bit from Haunt and Halloween into more mainstream pop culture. And starting with people that, people that play D&D are also a lot of people like you and I have seen at Gamehole kind of whatnot. These are people that also love Halloween.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely a lot of crossover there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So that's why you seem like the perfect guy to kick this whole new thing off with, because the books you've written, the things you've done, the people you know, the people you and I have played games with, everyone loves all the same stuff.
The crazy shit I do. I agree with that. I'm okay with it.
So now that we've given you a little backstory, Matt, can you give us and our viewers a little backstory about who you are and what you've accomplished over the years?
Sure. That's a long story. I've been at it for a while now. I'm an old man, but my name is Matt Forbeck. I started out as a tabletop game designer back when I was a teenager. Grew up here in southern Wisconsin, a little town called Beloit, which is on the border between Illinois and Wisconsin. And I grew up within basically spitting distance of Lake Geneva, where TSR used to be back in the day, and they published Dungeons and Dragons. So when I was a kid, I would drive up and actually play test games in the evenings with some of the ex-TSR guys that started a company called Pacesetter, which did Chill and Star Ace and Time Master and Sandman and all sorts of other neat games, right? Then I went off to college and I did some freelancing there, and I worked for a guy named Will Niebling, who had formerly been the first sales manager for TSR way back, the vice president of the company. And even worked for Gary Gygax back when I was in college too, back when he was running a company called New Infinities. And then I went to go work for Games Workshop for 6 months on a student work visa, and worked on Deathwing and Genestealer for Space Hulk, and worked on some Blood Bowl stuff. Came back from doing that. They offered me a full-time job, but I decided to come back. It's going to be 30 years ago tomorrow, actually, I came back. To be with my girlfriend, who said, if you're going to take a full-time job with them, you really, we can't do this anymore. There's no FaceTime 30 years ago, right? So,
right.
Or Google Hangouts or whatever else. So, so I came back to be with my girlfriend, figured I could always get another job. And that's my wife and the mother of my 5 children now. So it worked out pretty well for me. And I got into doing freelancing. After that, I opened a company called Pinnacle Entertainment Group with a guy named Shane Hensley. We did Deadlands and Brave New World and a whole bunch of other games over the years that won a bunch of awards. They do mostly Savage Worlds nowadays, but also Deadlands and such stuff. And then after I left that company, after 4 years serving as its president, we moved on. I went back to freelancing. Nowadays, I mostly write novels for various companies, including Halo novels. I write Dungeons and Dragons Endless Quest books. I've written a bunch of novels for D&D over the years as well. Written 4 Blood Bowl novels, write comic books, wrote the Magic the Gathering comic books for a year. I write for video games. I wrote a good chunk of Ghost Recon Wildlands. Came out a couple years ago. Story Doctor for Assassin's Creed Origins. What else did I do? I wrote the Marvel Encyclopedia for the last 2 editions. Lots and lots and lots of stuff. I basically have 5 kids I need to feed or help feed. My wife works as well. And so this is my full-time gig, which I love. I think it's fun. I get to work in a lot of different fields with a lot of really creative and interesting people, and help entertain people or help them entertain themselves even, which is a lot of games.
You're an extraordinarily prolific writer. I mean, the what you've written, the depth and breadth of everything is absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you. Over 30 years, it adds up, right?
So yeah, I mean, was that by design, or you just sort of lucked into it and it's like one leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next, or did you know I want to write everything?
Well, I knew I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to do games, and I knew I wanted to write novels at some point. Right? I have a creative writing degree I got from the University of Michigan when I was in college, and the idea was that I would. Originally, I had a degree program where I was going to become an engineer and get a degree in computer science, and then do that during the day, and then write in the evenings. And I realized about 2 years into that degree program that if I did that, I was never going to write, because I'd come back after a hard day at the office and I'd say, "Fuck it, I want to." I'm sorry.
Yeah. We didn't say that. Oh, fuck it, it's all right. I've got a little F-bomb here. If it,
okay, good. You never know who I'm talking with.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be chatting at a bar; it's another thing to be doing it in public. But so I said, if I do this, I'm gonna come home and I'm gonna say I want to see my girlfriend, grab a beer, play a game, and I was never gonna write in the evening. So instead, I decided to switch off the engineering degree and graduated with a creative writing degree in 3 years, and just jumped into the deep end, figuring that if I blew it entirely, I could always go back and complete the engineering degree. Right. And fortunately now 30 some years later, I still haven't gone back to college. So I guess it worked out well for me, but
and continues to.
Honestly, I think I always wanted to be a writer. I'm a storyteller by nature. I love this kind of stuff. If I had grown up in near Hollywood, if I'd grown up in Los Angeles, I probably would have gotten into film. If I'd grown up in New York, I would have gotten into theater maybe, or television. But since I grew up in southern Wisconsin, which is proximate to where Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games and such were born, that's what I ended up getting into. So it was just the group of people that I fell in with, right? The wrong group of people, as they say.
Well, yeah, but it was along those lines, though. It's interesting that, you look at some of the authors, though, from Wisconsin, two of them in sort of the fantasy genre. Pat Rothfuss is from Stevens Point.
Yep.
Amazingly, and even like Neil Gaiman maintains a place in Wisconsin, sort of rather famously.
Wisconsin for a long time, right? And we got Margaret Weiss and Troy Denning and a whole bunch of other ones. Doug Niles. I mean, I used to be part of a writers group here that met in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, once a month, called the Illiterates, right? And it was founded by Rob King. These are mostly ex-TSR writers. But the Wisconsin branches tend to close down now. But we had a bunch of guys. Monty Cook was a part of it. Now we have a large branch that started up in Seattle, and that seems to be carrying on for the rest of us. But those are still great guys out there doing some amazing things.
Well, what do you think it is about Wisconsin that sort of this group this area, and you all sort of knew each other, you're all from the same area. Why here? What was it about here that sort of spawned D&D and this desire to create these stories? Was it the fact that it snows 10 months out of the year and there's nothing else to do?
I think that's a good chunk of it, actually, right? It's so damn cold in the winter. You have to do something to entertain yourself, right?
This is bullshit. Let's write something.
D&D started with Gary in Lake Geneva and with Dave Arneson up in Minneapolis, right? Because, again, two very cold areas, and there's a good chunk of the year where you're just trapped inside the house for most of it. So if you like to get out and go hiking, skiing, hunting, and all that kind of stuff, still, there you have long periods of time where it's just dark, and you have to be able to entertain yourself. So these guys have a long history of doing that. I'm going to be going to GaryCon here in a couple months too. I guess a month now, and celebrating Gary's life and that old school type of thing going on. But it's kind of stunning how a lot of these guys just came together. We also had a number of people that came out of different colleges, like St. Olaf's up and was in Minneapolis area. That ended up putting out like Lisa Stevens and Jonathan Tweet and John Nephew and a bunch of other people. Beloit College down here where I grew up, actually, that's where Troy Denning and Andrea Hayday went. Greg Stafford graduated from there back in the early 70s himself. Gorantha and all the other wonderful things he's done. Who just, Greg passed about 6 months ago. And then in the 80s, we had guys like Will Heinmarch and Alex Flagg and such newer groups of guys who also graduated from Beloit College. So I don't know if it's something in the water. Or I honestly, I think it's a lot to do with the weather, right? It does get damn cold around here. And, if it was someplace else, maybe we'd be out on a lake just drinking beers. But as it is, we have to have something to do while we're drinking beer on fire inside.
So pour an old fashioned, get out the pencil and paper, and start writing. So you've written a lot of books, you've written a lot of games. When you're starting does it start from just the desire to write a story, and okay, this is going to become a game, this is going to become a short story or a novel, or is the process completely different for the two?
They're two different things because if you have an idea for a great setting, that's something that becomes a game a lot of the time, right? Especially role playing. If you have an idea for a great mechanic or a great intriguing way to play things, that can become more like a board game or a card game or something like that. If you have an idea for great characters and great events happening, that's often more like a novel, right? The real difference between doing games and novels is that with a novel, you control everything, right? With a game, you're just coming up with premises for other people to run with and riff on, right? Which can be really fun and exciting in its own way, but doesn't require exactly the same skill set to write a novel. I mean, with a novel, there's a lot of world building that goes on, especially if you're doing genre stuff. But you also have to come up with characters and plots and make sure it all hangs together. And there are lots of turns and twists and all that kind of stuff that when you're doing it as a game master, or especially if you're writing for a game master, if I'm writing an adventure for a game master or a game for somebody, I don't have to come up with everything, right? Because I know the game master and the players will handle a lot of the entertainment for themselves. I just have to come up with intriguing ideas that they can riff off of, right?
So hold on, Grant. So what's your favorite thing to write? Is it more games? Is it more novels? I mean, what do you?
I love them all, really. I mean, they're just
pick any of them and lean towards.
Right. I mean, to me, that's like asking what kind of novels do you like to read? Or, like I'll read anything. I'll read, what kind of books do you like to read? I read graphic novels and, romances and science fiction and autobiographies and whatever else comes across. Anything that intrigues me, right? Whatever's exciting about it. And sometimes, I've ended up working on games where I wasn't very interested in the subject matter when I started, but then, you dive into it. I did a game called Monster Rancher, a collectible card game at one point. And that was a game that was based upon a cartoon that was based upon a PlayStation 1 game, right? That was kind of a Pokemon knockoff. And I had to come up with a card game that riffed off all this and built on it and made sense. And so they sent me 26 episodes of this cartoon to watch. And, this is back before my kids were born. And I'm like, I really don't give a shit about this stuff. But after watching 13 hours of it, I was kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool. You have to figure out a way to love what you're working on, whatever it happens to be, right? And that way you can, if you can become passionate about it, you can then show that passion in your work. Otherwise, you're just phoning it in and it becomes dull to you and it becomes dull to the people who are going to be playing or reading it, experiencing it, however they do.
Well, then, if you're writing something, do you prefer, because you've written like the Halo novels, you've written the D&D novels, you've written Star Wars, which we'll get to in a second. Is it more enjoyable to create your own world, your own idea, your own settings, or to be able to write within the construct of the D&D world, the Endless Quest books, for example?
Yeah.
What's more interesting? What's more of a challenge?
It's more of a challenge to do the whole thing yourself, no doubt, right? There are different parameters that come with doing tie-in stuff, which is what we call licensed material, right? Yeah. So if I'm doing a licensed material, that means I'm not the boss of everything. I'm working with in somebody else's playground. Now, on the other hand, they have done the great job of building that sandbox for me to play in and make it fun and exciting and all that. So they've done a lot of the groundwork for me, right? I just have to rip off that and come up with interesting things. The trouble, of course, is that then I'm also beholden to them. I don't own that when I'm done with it at the end of the day.
Right.
It belongs to them. And they get to say yes or no whether or not if something gets published. If I write up something, they say, well, that doesn't really quite fit with what we're doing here, or that doesn't work with our plans for what we're doing here. I have to say, well, you're right, because you own it. It's your thing. If I'm writing my own thing, I get to say, well, screw it. I get to make all the decisions on this. I know exactly what's happening, and there's no bigger authority than this on this subject than I am. Which is, but it's also intimidating, the fact that I don't have other people to riff off ideas with. I don't have other people to do some of that grunt work for me, to do a lot of the world building, everything. If I want to do the research and make it all hang together, I have to do that myself, right? Yeah. I find it very rewarding to do it all myself, but it's still a lot of fun to do tie-in stuff. I actually swore off tie-in material like 8 years ago, something like that. About 7 years ago. I'm like, no, I'm just going to write my own stuff from now on. And then people kept coming with me with stuff. I'm like, oh, no, but I love that, right? And so I'm going to write in that, right? They came me with the Halo novels. I'm like, oh, man, I played Halo through. I actually visited the Bungie offices while Halo was in development before it had been announced, and I got to see it back then, right? So I've been following it since then. And I play it with my kids. It's the first-person shooter I introduce all my kids to when I'm playing games with my kids, because there's no blood in it, really. It's relatively sanitary for as far as gore and stuff like that. Like, okay, this is a good way to pitch you into it without doing Call of Duty Black Ops or something like that, or zombie game or whatever. Yeah. And so that's always the thing I start with. So I've got a lot of good feelings about Halo. And when they said, would you like to write a Halo novel? I'm like, yes, I would love to write a Halo.
And now you've written many Halo novels.
When it comes to you with Star Wars, you're like, yeah, I think I could probably figure out a way to, weasel that into my schedule somehow.
Well, I was going to say, what was that like when you got that phone call? It's like, Matt, do you mind?
It was funny, actually. It wasn't a phone call, it was an email, right? So my editor, Jennifer Heddle, who's a fantastic lady, emails me, and I'm like, if her name pops up in my inbox, and we've never communicated before, we follow each other on Twitter. To that point, I'm like, oh, we're kind of fun people, whatever.
Yeah.
God, and I'm like, I'm not even going to read it. I'm read everything else. I'm going to get myself ready. And I look at it, and the first line is like, "Hi, Matt. Just want to know, would you be interested in writing a novelization for the next Star Wars movie?" That was I yelled, "Holy shit!" so loud that my wife, who's upstairs, came running down to see if somebody had died. Right? She's like, what has befallen the family that caused you to scream like this? And I'm like, no, it's all good news. I went to San Francisco to go visit the Lucasfilm offices and talk to them about reading this book. And I got to read the screenplay 9 months ahead of time and see some of the dailies, and it was fantastic fun. So
I'm assuming an NDA about 1,000 pages long too.
What's that?
About 1,000-page NDA as well.
Yeah, no, the NDA was brutal. Although I've signed worse ones, right? I had one that I signed for a video game company that said if I violated the NDA, I owed them €500,000. Like, number one, I'm not going to violate the NDA, and number two, I don't have €500,000, guys. So good luck with that.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, because I can't even begin to imagine what it's like. So like, here's a Star Wars movie. It's going to make $1 billion. It's going to be one of the biggest things in the world. And here you are thrust into this world that everyone just dreams about.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, we got to tour the offices. We had a big writers summit that, we had like Greg Rucka and Beth Rivas and Alex Freed all showed up too. The Marvel team as well were there. And it was just neat to be able to sit down with people and just geek out over this. We got to meet the whole story group and go through everything with them and bounce ideas off them. And just fun. It's a really good group of people to work with. They're very sharp. They clearly care about this stuff as much as ESPN does, right? And they really do care about making the most entertaining and fun and meaningful products. Whether it's a film or a book or a comic or a lunchbox or whatever, they're all very much into it. It's really neat.
Now, is that how the Avengers Encyclopedia and the Captain America book came about too, or did you create those and then pitch them to Marvel?
No, that was they're all owned by Disney nowadays, but back when I started doing those, actually that was interesting because I just kind of cold called an editor at Comic-Con. I just walked up to the booth, published by DK Publishing, which has got a license to do that. Right? And I walked up to the booth at DK, and I was there for Comic-Con. I'm like, well, I'm here for all 5 days, so I'm just wandering around. I'm tired. You really only need like a day or two to see Comic-Con, right? And by the third or fourth day, you're like, God, what am I doing here? I guess I'll go and see if I can find anybody who wants to hire me for something. So I stopped by the DK booth. I said, are there any editors here? And this guy stands up, Alistair Dougal, and he says, yes, I'm an editor. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm a huge comic book fan. I've written all these different things. Let me give you a card, and if you have anything you'd be interested in working on with me at some point, I'd love to hear from you. And like 3 months later, I get an email from him out of the blue saying, Matt, we need somebody to revise the Marvel Encyclopedia for the next edition. Is this something you'd be interested in? Yes, sign me up. Man.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, that was kind of stunning. It's part of doing this is not just having the ability to do it, because a lot of people can do these things, right? Well, not there's a small group of us who have these skills and wherewithal to do this, but then to let the editors who are hiring these people know that you're available and that you're interested is right? Back when I used to do a lot of writing for Wizards of the Coast and TSR, I knew that they would set up their schedule for the year. Like there'd be like 1 month out of the year where they'd set up the schedule for the rest of the year, right? Sometimes that month would shift and you didn't know exactly when it was going to be. So I would call up Bruce Hurd, who was the guy who handed out the freelance assignments back in those days, and say, Bruce, when are you guys signing different jobs for the year? He's like, in 6 weeks. I just write it on my calendar, call him up, Bruce, it's 6 weeks. And it's going to be 4 weeks, write it on my calendar until because I knew that if I was at the top of his mind when assignments were coming down, then I would get a job. And if I wasn't, it was just as easy for him to forget about me and move on to somebody else. So I always made sure that I was on his mind when he got to that point. Nowadays, it's been several years now. I haven't had to actually look for work. A lot of times work just kind of finds me, which is really a wonderful place.
That's nice. That's convenient.
It is. I mean, and I I always remember those early days when I was hungry and had to be humping around for work wherever I could find it, beating the bush as hard as I can. And so I never take that for granted. But a lot of times I just turn around and suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm just about to run off the edge of the treadmill here. I need some work. And then I'll get an email from somebody saying, are you interested in this? Do you have time available? And one of the interesting things is as you do this, when you start out, you might be juggling like 6 different projects at once, and you're talking to people in various stages about it. And when you're starting out, you're lucky if one of those comes through, right? You're always talking, trying to see if anything will happen. And so, you know, when that one comes through, you're like, yes, and you go right at it. And as you get further and further in your career, suddenly 2 or 3 of those might come through. And then all of them come through. The problem is if they all come through at once, right? And then you have to say, oh, sorry, guys, I need to rejigger the schedule here a little bit. Like right now, I'm talking with a video game company about doing some work for them. I'm as one of their lead writers for a game, and you know, it's the date keeps getting pushed back. Originally, it was like let's start in December. Now let's start in March or whatever. And I know this happens. It's nothing personal. It's just there are all these different. There's so many different moving parts in any kind of a large organization, especially if you're doing anything creative. And what'll happen is they'll come back to me at some point and I'll say, well, I guess I'm going to end up, you know, burning the candle at both ends for a couple of months, and we'll figure it out. As I like to say, sometimes I'll just take that candle, chop it into little tiny pieces, and melt it whole wick all the way down through the middle. You know, fortunately, my wife and my kids are very supportive of this kind of stuff, and it's a fun lifestyle. They get to see all the kind of cool stuff I get to work with too, and the kids love that. I mean, we get all the video games and all that kind of stuff, and you know, play all the different platforms, and because
so with all the
tax write-off. It's all fun.
With all the stuff you have going on, Matt, how do you find time for family?
How do I find time for what?
For family.
For family.
I mean, I'm sure you've got. I mean, you said burning the candle at both ends. I mean, we all, when you have your own business and you're working with the passion like that, you have to find time for family. How do you find time for family?
Well, they always come first, right? That's always the trick. And one of the great things about being a freelancer is that if my kids need me at any point, I can take the time off, right? Or if they need me to take them to a doctor's appointment. One of my kids got a doctor appointment tomorrow. I just don't work tomorrow morning, right? I go take them to the doctor. We do that stuff, whatever else. I often wonder how families who don't have a full-time freelancer manage this kind of stuff, right? I guess you have to take off work all the time, and it just seems like it'd be crazy to try to pull that off. I'm only responsible to myself. Now, on the other hand, I work a lot of weekends and nights and all that kind of stuff. I also work a lot when everybody else is asleep. Right. And that's a trade-off I'm willing to make. I don't sit around and spend a whole lot of time, you know, at bars or watching television or whatever else. I'm pretty much focused on family and work. And then, you know, if I can get some socializing in the meantime, that's fun. But a lot of times I end up doing that at conventions and stuff instead, where I'm not so much worried about whether or not I'm going to see my buddies at the bar this week. I have some friends in town, but I see them like once a month or two. Right. Because right now my kids are, well, my eldest is off at college, and the others are quadruplets, believe it or not. And they're 16.
Oh my gosh.
And they're only going to be with me for another year and a half before they go off to college. So I'm trying to make as much time as I can to be with them and spend time with them before they end up, you know, going off and having their own lives.
Wow, that's a all or nothing
really
right
quickly.
there.
I mean, I've been one of those dads who's been the guy who says, you know, they always say, oh, hold on to every moment because it goes fast. I'm like, yeah, I'm holding on. It still goes fast. You know, there's nothing you can do about it.
You're right. This is true. This is true.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you look out there, what authors are you reading now? What's out there that's exciting you? That you will read this and say, oh my God, this guy, this girl, this whomever, this is the future. You gotta pay attention to
Gareth Hanrahan's new novel, The Gutter Prayer, which is fantastic, right? If you
I actually just bought that the other day based on your recommendation on Facebook.
Good. I had a wonderful chance to see Gareth again. I was actually in Ireland about a month ago, not even a month ago, 3 weeks ago. My mother died a year ago. My siblings and I went out to go scatter her ashes on the old family graveyard in the middle of Ireland, near a place called Ballinasloe. And as we were there, we decided we're going to go down and visit the Blarney Stone, Castle Blarney and all that, which is near Cork. And Gareth lives near Cork. So I happened to be in Cork the day that his novel came out. And he's like, well, I'd appreciate an excuse to get out of the house. So I said, well, come on out and have a pint, and I'll buy you a beer or two. And he brought a copy of his book with to hand to me. So I a copy 2 weeks before it was out in the U.S. And I was like, oh, this is great. I got to start reading on the plane ride home. So having author friends is kind of neat, right? Just get
yes.
Cool early books. But yeah, I just finished reading that. I'm just starting a book by called Bear Town by a guy named Frederick Bachman, who my wife loves. I've not read his stuff before, but he's a Swedish author, and I have a lot of friends in Sweden that I get to go work with occasionally. N.K. Jemison's books, the Stonebreaker cycle, or whatever, her trilogy that she just concluded last year. Fantastic stuff. Every one of them won either the Hugo or the Nebula, or both. I forget. It was amazing. Yeah. Really, really good stuff. But I'll read anything. I'm reading, one of my other books is about, I can't remember the title of it, but it's about sex, drugs, and money laundering, right? Because that's research for a novel I'm working on at the moment. I want to know how to do all this kind of shit. That's what I tell the FBI when they show up. It's research for a novel.
Well, trying to raise 5 kids can't be cheap, so the extra cash you might be able to make.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like, do you see how many children live in this house? Oh my God.
Exactly. No, it's funny. I've got to be on a FBI watch list, several times over at this point, just for the shit I have to research the different books I've written. Right? It's part of you're plotting, right? You're coming to plots. Actually, a friend of mine, Lee Goldberg, has got a new novel that just came out. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the Ian Ludlam novels. I think the first one was a book about a writer who's got a gig with the U.S. government who has to come up with different ways the terrorists might do things, right? And then he's suddenly somebody actually starts to put his ideas into action. And he gets caught up in this whole international plot. And Lee's a great storyteller. He wrote Monk for many years, both as novels and as the showrunner, I think, over there, or at least one of the writers. And really sharp guy too. So that was a really fun book. The second book for that just came out. Charlie Jane Anders' new book just came out too, and I'm looking forward to reading that one too. She's one of the editors over at Tor, but she's also done some really amazing stuff. Chuck Wendig, I always read his stuff. He's got his latest Blackbirds novel, just came out. And I think it's called Vulture or Vultures.
I was going to say, I'm recognizing a lot of these authors
in the spring, which I'm excited about reading too.
Cool. Very cool. So looking at all of your works, is there anything that of all the things you've written, what would you like to see optioned to be a movie?
Well, I've had a couple of them optioned to be a movie. Now, this is again going back to what what's better? Is it better to write tie-in stuff or your own stuff? Nobody options your tie-in stuff, right? It's already something else. So, so your original stuff is what gets optioned. So I've had 2 novels get optioned. One was called Vegas Nights, which was kind of a Harry Potter meets Ocean's 11 kind of thing set in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And the second one was called Immortals, which is a science fiction film, near future science fiction about the world's oldest man. It's set in a world where your brain can be backed up into and then restored to a clone body if you've been killed.
Yeah.
And the first guy it ever happened to was a Secret Service agent who was killed trying to save the president, right? And it's 150 years later now. He's been killed for the 9th time, and he comes back, and he hasn't backed himself up for 3 months, but he's been brutally murdered, and it's been put out on the internet as a video, and now he has to go out and solve his own murder, right? So that book has been optioned for a film 5 times now. They keep just renewing the option. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. The guy who purchased the option is one of the guys, excuse me, I think it's Pierre Morel is his name, who he directed Taken, actually, for Liam Neeson. So, and I've seen that there's a screenplay that's been written. They've just been shopping around forever. I don't know what it's in development turnaround at the moment or whatever it is, but they keep signing me up to sell it to them again and again. So I don't complain about the free money that comes in.
Yeah, that's gonna be all right.
Yeah, it's not send your kids to college money. It's maybe have a nice vacation for a week money, that kind of a thing. But it's still. It's good fun, and hopefully it turns into something amazing.
Yeah. Very cool.
New novel I'm working on right now that I've had some interest in as well, and hopefully that'll be good. It's a novel I've been trying to write for Tor. I actually sold it to Tor about 6 years ago, and then I got sick, my dad got sick, my mom died, and it's kind of got crazy. Plus, my editor got fired for sexual harassment. So,
wow.
And my new editor's like, well, I don't have time to work in this book. I said, no, that's great because I'm going to be late. It's going to work out for both of us. But I'm actually starting to work on it now. Finally, I was like 6 books behind at one point. I committed to 6 different novels I hadn't quite gotten to, and now I'm down to 1. I only have to finish this 1 book, and I'm all caught up. So I'm pretty thrilled about that.
Yay!
That book and a game I'm developing for Calliope, which the guys who do Suro, among other games, and roll for it. And they had me as part of a thing they called the Titans of Gaming as a Kickstarter a few years ago.
I remember that one.
That was one of the stretch goals for this, which they got like a dozen of what they thought were the top game designers in the world to come together and do board games for them. So I've got one that's in development for them, and I was just chatting with them yesterday about that. So I've got to finish that up, finish the novel up, and then hopefully I'll have more work fall in my lap before I'm done with all those.
That's cool. Matt, what do you think the future of gaming is? Speaking of gaming.
What do I think the future of gaming is? That's a good question. I also run this thing called the Diana Jones Award, which we do at Gen Con every year, which is, we just, a group of us get together and give out a goofy awards, whatever we thought was the coolest thing in gaming that year. And last year we gave it out to Actual Play, which is basically people making videos and playing games online and then showing that to lots of other people, right? And honestly, I think that is that's showing us the way in a lot of ways. This is giving us the kind of feedback that we've never had in gaming before, right? It used to be if you wrote a game, you'd send it out in the world, and people would either write you fan letters or hate mail or whatever the hell it was and say, oh, yeah, I love this, or I couldn't stand this part or whatever. And that was about as much as you ever got from anybody. And teaching somebody how to play a game was a bear because you would have to sit down and say, okay, this is it. But you can only teach, 6 people at a time at a convention, and maybe an hour for every demo or whatever. And if you're lucky, you manage to teach 100 people in a weekend, right? Nowadays, you got guys like Matt Mercer and his whole crew, and Satine Phoenix and Rudy Rutenberg and their crew do amazing stuff, and James D'Amato and Ivan Van Norman, all these different guys from Geek and Sundry and whatever, that go out there and show people how to play these games in amazing ways. The McElroy brothers do another great one. These comedians that do this, the Zonecast. And it's amazing that you can actually show people how to play a game in a way that, you just can't read that and get it the same way, right? They can teach you skills that are best visually transmitted to you, or transmitted by video at least, than ever could gotten out of a book. So to me, I think that kind of confluence, there's something coming there that is just over the horizon. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to end up, but somebody's going to come up with something even more innovative out of that, I think.
We'll see what happens. Do you think that gaming is on the rise? Do you think it's peaked? Do you think it's coming back down? What do you think about that?
Always on the rise. I mean, I think it's something that's in a very large and real sense of taking over the world, right? If you look back in to 1973, 74 when Dungeons and Dragons came out, and the stuff that Gary and Dave came up with are stuff that it's in the lexicon now. We all understand what it means to level up and to have hit points and have experience points, all that kind of stuff. That's stuff that didn't exist before then. Nobody knew anything about that, right? It's pervasive, not just throughout games, but throughout society nowadays. It's become kind of part of our jargon that we use for anything. And to see games just now become even more pervasive. We had Dungeons and Dragons, we had Magic the Gathering, we got World of Warcraft, we got the Xbox, the PlayStation, all this kind of stuff. Fortnite, it's just become so pervasive over everything people do. Now everybody's got a supercomputer in their pocket that they could play amazing games on that I would have killed for back when I was in college, right? Yeah. I was playing, what was that digging game with the knight, Black Knight or whatever it was, crazy shit like this that you couldn't, it was all black and white, just one bit stuff, right?
Yep.
So to be able to actually see the kind of stuff you can put on a phone nowadays, on a screen that's not that much smaller than what I was working on full-size computer back in those days. It's just kind of stunning. So I think gaming is getting bigger and bigger all the time. I think the actual play movement is going to make it even bigger just because, again, it makes it much more accessible to a newer generation of people to be able to learn how to do this stuff and do it well, right? And we're seeing a lot of feedback where people are now coming up with their own games and self-publishing them too. I mean, it's easier to publish a game now than it ever has been before. You don't have to worry about, is Wizards of the Coast going to buy my game? Especially if it's a role-playing game. Screw it. Just go out and put it out on drive-through RPG or put it up on your own site, publish it with somebody else. It's so much easier than it used to be. And, nobody cares if it's the most polished thing in the world. you can have this very punk aesthetic towards what you're doing too. 3/4 in the truth, basically. You're just going up there and putting it up with a PDF and saying, play this and try it, right? One of the other things we considered for the Diana Jones Award was the 200-word RPG challenge, which basically was do a role-playing game in 200 words. And people do amazing stuff out of this, right? Just the constraints that are around it and what it inspires them to do and how it inspires them to be as concise as they possibly can to come up with these amazing ideas and to express them as beautifully as they can and elegantly as they can. Amazing stuff. So I'm very hopeful for the gaming industry in general, right? I think the gaming business, tabletop, I think is doing great. Gaming business for video games, man, it's tough to want to be a video game developer these days because there's just the job cycle is it's challenging, right? They burn through young people very quickly. We've got just this afternoon, Activision Blizzard laid off 8% of their staff, which ended up being 800 people that are out of the job, right? And these are people who, in a lot of cases, this is their dream job. And suddenly they're out, and they might never come back to professionally developing games ever again, because they might decide, hey, building databases over here is a much more profitable, stable way to go.
More lucrative, yeah.
Well, you look at that. I mean, if we're at this point where everyone can publish, you come up with any idea you want, and you can publish it any way, any method. Has that been hurting the quality, do you think, of what's out there, or do you think the cream is naturally going to rise to the top? And people will find what's good through word of mouth or whatever.
If you go back to when desktop publishing really started cooking, and it was around the time when Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition came out, and what we call the D20 glut nowadays, right? Where anyone who wanted to could basically come out with their own version of Dungeons & Dragons or books for Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah. And
I think we had a lot of crap come out then, right? But I think we had some great stuff come out of it too. We have some amazing companies. Green Ronin, for instance, was a company that just started out in those days, and they've become one of the leading companies in the industry, just doing some amazing stuff. Atlas Games has done a lot of great stuff since then as well. There's been a lot of neat companies, but I think the whole idea of doing storytelling games, things that like Jason Morningstar and Steve Segedy have been doing there over at Bully Pulpit, where they're just trying to come up with interesting ways of telling stories. And Paul Sega's been doing a lot of this too. And Robin Laws and Jonathan Tweet and Ken Hyde, all these guys who are friends of mine who do this kind of stuff. They've been doing amazing things. But to see one of the other things that nominated for the Diana Jones Award, I want to keep harping on the award, but we consider was Harlem Unbound, right, by Chris Spivey. It takes the racism inherent in 1920s Lovecraftian horror and turns it on its head and places it in Harlem in the 20s instead, right? And it's just fantastic. It's such a great game, very intriguing on very many levels. And that's the kind of game I don't think you could have seen 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. Maybe you would never have seen, right? But because Chris could step up and say, I want to publish this myself, and he did such a great job with it. And right now, Chaosium is actually going to be doing the second edition of that game. We're going to be publishing it for him. So I think it's because we've got so many great tools, and because we have this burgeoning and obviously even better, it's becoming more diverse of a group of people that are creating these kind of things and playing these kind of things. I think we're getting more and more innovation and more different ideas into these games. It's only better for everybody, right? You don't want to be playing the same old damn thing for 40 years, right? I mean, I still love first edition Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, the old school Revolution and all that. I enjoy that stuff. But I also want to see what the new cool shit is out there. And I think the only way you do it is by bringing new people into the field. Right? And I think we've been doing a fairly decent job of that over the last 5 or 10 years, and hopefully we're getting better as we go.
Yeah.
Matt, that's awesome stuff right there. I have a question. For aspiring authors, is there anything you could tell aspiring authors, or if you could look back at Matt 30 years ago, would there be anything that you would tell 30 years ago, Matt, to better yourself today?
At first, I thought you said expiring authors. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not that old.
No, aspiring.
Holy shit, no.
Expiring.
I guess. No. Yeah, the funny part, I've had people ask this question before, and the best answer I think I've ever seen is that everybody's got their own way that they get into whatever they're doing, whatever industry they're breaking into, whatever else. And you tend to burn the bridge behind you as you go just because you're crossing it, right? So it's very difficult to replicate any one person's way of doing it, right? I would say the top things that any writer needs, any creator needs of any kind is persistence, right? Because when you're starting out, I think it was Ira Glass, who does great public radio stuff, would mention this too. He said, one of the things you really have when you're starting out is you have taste. You understand what's good out there, right? You've developed some kind of ability to discern what is good and what's bad, and that's what's going to lead you to being great eventually. But the problem is that you turn that taste on yourself early on, you realize that you suck. Right? Of course you suck. Of course you suck, right? There's no reason that it would be impossible for you to be amazing straight out of the gate, right? But if you're persistent and you're dedicated to improving and dedicated to learning, you can get past those points. You get to the point where you don't think you suck as much, which hopefully you're right. You don't suck as much, right? And you're going to get better and better as you go. So a lot of it is just being persistent, being willing to learn, and being willing to build up a thick skin as far as rejection goes, right? Because one of the neat things about writing and about game design and whatever is it's really not personal. People are judging your work. They're not judging you as a human being, right? You need to be able to separate those two things out. Whether or not you like my game or not doesn't mean I'm an asshole, right? I may be an asshole, but it's got nothing to do with whether or not it's a good game or not. The funny part is you get guys who come up with great games who are terrible people. And you can get wonderful people who just can't come up with a good game for their lives, right? They're separate things in a lot of ways. So I think it's wonderful when they coincide. I think you should always try to be kind to other people. You should be helpful as you're growing, as you're becoming a creator. Especially when you're starting out as a creator, the people you start out with and the people you meet, that's your cohort of creators that you're going to be going with throughout your entire career, right? And hopefully you'll have some people who are mentoring you, and hopefully you'll mentor some people as you get better at it yourself. But the guys that you start out with, the guys you know that way, those are going to be your compadres for life, right? So try to be as kind as you can to with them. There's some people I think always look at this as a zero-sum game where it's about competition, and if he gets that gig, then I don't get that gig. There's a tiny bit of truth to that, but the fact is, it's really more of it's not zero-sum. It's an attitude of plenty that you need to take to this. If I don't get that gig, I can either do this other gig, or I can come up with something on my own that might be better than that, whatever that gig was going to be, right? I lost out on gigs to some amazing people over the years, and they're still friends of mine. I don't hate them, honestly. It's but the reason I was saying I went over to visit Bungie back about however many years ago, 20, 25 years ago it was, and it was to work on a game for them, one of their fantasy games, and a guy named John Scott Tynes ended up with the job instead. And John ended up being a great developer for Xbox. He's doing VR stuff right now. He did a game called Puppet Land, which is this great little indie game. And in fact, when he was doing the latest Kickstarter for it a couple of years ago, I ended up writing a little bit for it. And I have just incredible respect and love for John. And I'm thrilled that I got, even if I didn't get the gig, I wanted him to have it, right? And I think that's really the right attitude is, even if I don't get the gig, then I get to play whatever you came up with. I get to read that stuff. I get to enjoy it myself.
Yeah.
Why would I want to make that a competition, right? I mean, at certain levels, sure. We all want to. I'm going to use the fact that he beat me at that gig to try to improve my game and level up myself and do better. But don't concentrate on it as if there's only so many people that get a chance to do this kind of stuff. Try to make the circle bigger. Put more seats at the table, as they say, and make it fun for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you can relate across all industries, which, I mean, is so true. So thank you for those words.
Yeah, I agree. I think people tend to get very short-sighted about it, but there's a lot of cutthroat assholes out there who will tell you, no, you need to just get through past everybody, stomp on their heads as you go past. But, man, that's just a short, awful, painful way to live, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, with that and kind of bringing people up and whatnot, there's been a lot of this in the last 5 years, especially kind of the whole Gamergate thing and, women writing games and playing games and being involved in this whole industry. Are you seeing, are we kind of turning the corner yet? Is there finally more acceptance, or is there still a lot of that crappy, shitty troll, mentality out there? Is that growing? Is that going away?
Well, I tend to be very optimistic, but on the other hand, I'm a white, straight guy, right? So to me, I'm probably not the right person to ask that question to, because the level of abuse I get in this industry is nothing compared to what a lot of other people I know.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it always looks like it's getting better because I look around Gen Con, I go to other conventions, and I see more minorities, I see more women, I see more people, a much more diverse group than I used to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sexual orientations, different genders, everything else. And to me, that's fantastic. But I also think that it's caused a bit of a backlash over the years. I think if you look at Gamergate, how that's affected the video game industry, and we've had some people try to bring that in the tabletop industry too. Fortunately, they've not done that well. Just this last weekend, we had a big blow up with Zach Smith, who's one of the old school Revolution guys. His girlfriend, ex-girlfriend Mandy Morbid came out. Zach was one of the guys who did Porn Stars Playing D&D back in the day too, which was pretty popular. But it turned out that he'd been pretty abusive to her up to the point of raping her, right? And he'd also been really just abusive to people online and been a jackass and to a bunch of friends of mine too. So I was happy to see. Well, I wasn't happy to see the abuse happen, but I was thrilled that Mandy was able to be so brave and step up and say, "Look, this is what's really happening over here." Yeah. And see people uniformly so far, with maybe a couple really jackass exceptions, line up in support of her, right? So I think that kind of thing is going to be something that hopefully makes people able to be braver about that kind of thing and about speaking up about it. Because I know it's hard. And again, I'm not the one who's the subject of this abuse. I want to just try to make it better for people who are. Hopefully we can all band together. Hopefully it's something we can all band together and agree on, that we should make this more inclusive and friendly and welcoming to as many different type of people as we can. Because again, that's the way we're going to get the most exciting new stuff out there. There's no reason to cut off entire groups of people just because of who they are when they bring so much interesting stuff to the table, right?
Yeah, the haunted attraction industry is the same way as the gaming industry, from what I'm learning, and it's mainly male driven. And there are very, very creative, smart women out there in these industries that aren't being heard. And it's unfortunate that we're in the day we're in right now, and women are still not being able to be put on an even playing field. So I love to hear what is in these industries as possible, because I think they're just as creative, if not more creative, and more driven than us as us men. So kudos to you for that.
No, I think that it's creativity is not something that belongs to any particular group, right? I don't think that men are any more creative than women. I don't think women are any more creative than men. I think we should just let it blossom in everybody. I think we should encourage it, right? I think it's one of our great strengths as a society, actually, is to be able to encourage this kind of stuff and let people express themselves, right? Now, one of the reasons I think you've seen it be mostly white males over the years is that being a creator is usually a position of privilege, right? It's something where you're not having to bust your ass and be mired in poverty for a lot of it. And I know not everybody, especially a lot of writers, there's a lot of writers out there, or even white males, who are not exactly wealthy, but at least you're stepping into a group of people that are more accepting of you, or traditionally have been, and you often have a little bit more wiggle room than a lot of these minorities and women. So part of the problem that we've been trying to address with this, like I'm on the group of people that selects the guests of honor for Gen Con, for instance, right? And for many years, we had a whole large group of people, and we're like, well, let's just bring in, we'll just give them free badges and a cheaper hotel room, stuff like that. The problem is that a lot of the women and minorities still couldn't afford to show up, right? So they would end up having to run GoFundMes and such just to be able to pay for their plane ticket and their hotel rooms and their meals and all that kind of stuff. There's not an easy solution for that, right? Other than somebody stepping up and saying, hey, here's millions of dollars to pay to all these people to make it easy for everybody. What we try to do there at Gen Con now is we're bringing in 3 or 4 people every year and giving them the full treatment. So they do get the flight out, the hotel room, the meals, all that kind of stuff. They're taken care of, right? And unfortunately, because it's not unfortunate. I mean, we're dealing with people who are guests of honor, right? So they are generally fairly well established. But we do try to make it as welcoming and broad as we can as well. Like last year, for instance, we had Anita Sarkeesian was one of our guests of honor, right? And Anita has kind of been a lightning pole for the whole Gamergate movement. We're like, you know what? We want to declare that we're on her side. We're on the side of these people, not on the side of these assholes who are trying to be gatekeepers, keep people out of the industry. We want to be welcoming to everybody. So we're going to bring Anita in and focus on the kind of good work that she's doing to bring new people in. Right. And she mostly focuses on video games, but she also has a lot of great things to say about tabletop games, and actually was able to do that at the convention. If you go online, you can look up the stuff on the Gen Con channel and check some of that out. It's pretty amazing.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely do that.
Cool. I run out of questions.
Yeah,
if you want to keep talking, Matt, we're happy to.
I'm always happy to
listen.
ramble. You know, I'm a writer. I get paid by the word. You know, it's crazy. But that's actually a funny thing. If you do video games, you don't get paid by the word. Never get paid by the word for video games, right? Because in video games, you want to say as much as you possibly can in as few words as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to ramble on and on and on. But, you know, if you're doing tabletop games, you're doing fiction, obviously you usually get paid by the word. And that's the reason you sometimes get these big goddamn books, you know, really thick books, because, hey, you're getting paid by the word. Why the hell not write as much as you can? But if you're writing video games, you want to be able to write things very quickly. So instead, I get paid by like the week instead, or the project, and never by the word, because, again, I'd be slitting my own throat then.
That's what Pat Rothfuss must be getting paid by, because he's been working on book 3 for years.
Well, he's cool,
years and years and years.
Pat is an amazing guy. I was having a conversation with Mike Cole on this about this on Twitter a couple days ago, and he's like, you know, maybe we should just be letting authors take as long as they damn well want, because, you know, if you want to look at what Pat's been able to do and the kind of amazing things he's done with fantasy, you can't really argue with his methods, right?
Well, right. It's just, you know, Pat's written sort of 2.5 books now. And it's what, 500,000 or 600,000 words between two. Right? Yeah, they're all the short one is 600 pages.
Yeah, exactly.
And
but
now
he's done so well with them. I mean, they're really well written books.
Oh yeah, they're remarkable.
And, I mean, speaking of a guy who's you know, he's sold so much out of even his first book, but right now he's got a deal for Lin-Manuel Miranda's producing films and television shows for his books, right?
Yeah. 2 books.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is amazing. And the guy who's actually the showrunner for the TV show is a guy named John Rogers, who's a friend of mine. And John actually started, you know, he's been doing TV shows for many years. He did Leverage, the TV show, as well, and he's done Librarians and a bunch of other stuff. But he's also a big D&D player, right? He goes way back playing Dungeons and Dragons and all sorts of other games too. So it's kind of interesting. We have this situation in where Hollywood and tabletop games are wound up pretty tightly nowadays, right? Now we even have the Green Bay Packers play Catan on their road trips, right? So it's all good. It's pretty fantastic.
It's fantastic. But I'm really surprised at GameholeCon every year you see Pat Rothfuss walking around. I'm surprised people aren't like going up and just like, write the book, get the book out for the love of God.
But you got to give him a break. I mean, even no matter what he's doing, Pat, when that book comes out, it's going to be fantastic. We all know.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Because he won't let it go out until it is. And you know what? The guy deserves some time on his own to do whatever the hell he wants to. Yeah. And here's the best thing about it. I mean, it's neat that you want the book that badly, right? I understand why people are, you know, are irritated about the book not being out, or George R. R. Martin's latest book not being out, or whatever. That's because they love it and they want it so badly, right? But the neat thing about this world is that there's plenty of other shit to watch and read and everything else. So, so I would never give these guys a hard time over this, because you know, they're doing their own creative thing at their own pace, and honestly, they've earned the ability to do that. The books have sold so well and done so well, they don't have to turn those books. If they wanted to say, "Screw you, I'm not turning that book in," they have that right.
Yeah,
they can do it. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. But but you know, they get to. Fortunately, both of them seem to have a pretty decent sense of humor about it too. I think they've had to develop that over the years. And I support them both. I mean, I'm a guy who writes a lot of books in a year. I had 7 books come out last year. I mean, 4 of them were those Endless Quest books, which are pretty short.
I did I got a couple of those for my son actually for Christmas.
Oh, so. Good. Thank you. Yeah, they're good fun. I enjoyed them. I actually had 2 more I wrote. They're coming out in September. And supposedly they're going to commission me for a couple more. We'll see how that goes.
Nice. Chances are I'm gonna have them with me at GameholeCon if you don't mind signing them for me.
I'll be honored. You kidding me?
All right.
I'm always happy to sign anything ever.
Because you actually signed the first time I met you, I have to admit, was when you were at GameholeCon signing Dungeonology.
Yeah.
Which was just published, which I think just came out just not too long before GameholeCon. Yep. And they were signing it there. You were, I think it was like the second one in line. For somebody, it's like, oh shit, you're selling the book. It's for sale right over there. Can't pass this up.
Exactly. No, I hand sell too. You know, I do what I can. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, when it came out of GameholeCon, hadn't even been released yet. It was going to be released the next Tuesday, and we had to get some early copies in. Turns out that the guy who owns one of the best game stores in town, On Board Games, is my college roommate. Right, actually, it was one of my college roommates. Yeah, Brian Witch.
That's fantastic.
Brian and I used to actually do some game design together back in the day for target games out of Sweden and for Grenadier Models and a few other things. But yeah, we've known each other for, I guess, 30 some years now. And, you know, Brian, I'm sure we can get you some copies of the book a weekend early so we can get some sold here at the show and, you know, get some excitement.
I feel especially honored. I got a pre-release copy of it. Wow.
It's amazing.
That's fantastic.
No, that's
I've got one question quick, and back to the Captain America stuff. Your Captain America Ultimate Guide, forward by Stan Lee. Did you actually have the opportunity to meet Stan?
I have met Stan once briefly in a hallway at Comic-Con.
Okay.
That had nothing to do with that. Right?
Okay.
That was me wandering through going, oh shit, that's Stan Lee. He was on the phone. I'm like, I understand. That was about it, right? But he's written he wrote the introduction to that one. He wrote an introduction to Marvel Encyclopedia as well. The DK guys all set that up, so I'm pretty flattered that it happened. And obviously, he died not too long ago. And what an amazing guy, right? Just a creative force.
Absolutely.
I've got enough history on Stan and on the rest of the Marvel group that you know, I know there's some contention between him and some of the other creators, but you really cannot give Stan enough credit for what he did, right? To build that company up from what he had when he started. Guys like Jack Kirby, of course, are huge as well, and Steve Ditko and everybody else who worked with them in those early days. Just amazing stuff that they came up with. That obviously is powering this massive global powerhouse of storytelling nowadays, right? We should all be so lucky, right?
That is true. Right. That is very true. If it weren't for them, there wouldn't be a Matt Forbeck. There wouldn't be all of this that we're looking at. And
we'd all be doing some different shit. Right? We'd find something else. Creative people always find a way to do something interesting.
But do you think you'd make a good painter though, instead of a writer?
No, me, I'd suck. I'd be writing something else.
You got to start somewhere, Matt.
A novelist,
you got to start somewhere.
And he never had a chance to do it. He wanted to be a novelist. When he came out with his first story back in 1942 or so, it was a short story he wrote for Captain America back for like Captain America number 3 or 4. I forget which one it was. And the reason he had to write a short story, he was like 17 years old, is that you got a cheaper postage rate if there was a prose story in the magazine, right? Because it was considered to have literary value because of that, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just some picture book magazine. So, so he was actually commissioned to write that one Captain America story. That was his first story he ever did. And he changed his name to Stan Lee because he wanted to save Stanley Lieber, his birth name, for his novels when he got around to writing those. And he never actually did it. He just, obviously, Marvel just took off like a rocket and he rode that baby all the way through. So,
he did okay for himself.
Yeah, there are worse outcomes for a guy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's true.
Oh, that's fantastic.
His brother kept his name. Larry Lieber still writes I think he still writes the Spider-Man daily cartoon strip that's in newspapers. And still Larry, that's Stan's brother, his younger brother.
Oh, wow.
Fun little
that's too much research I've done on this shit over the years, but yeah.
You become a knower of all things.
It's funny. I was actually going through some stuff I got out of my mom's house, and I found a paper I had written in 6th or 7th grade, I think, and it was about the history of Marvel Comics' golden age. So I'm like, so this is the kind of stuff that's been fascinating me since I was a kid, and I'm still in love with it all. I feel very lucky to be able to do some of the stuff professionally occasionally.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, Matt, thank you for your time. I appreciate everything that you've given us tonight. I hope we can do this again.
Questions for the conversation.
Yes, this is a great conversation. And if there's any way that somebody can reach out to you or they can see all your work, is there a website or anything like that that anybody can go to?
Sure. You can go to forbeck.com. That's Forbeck. And that's got my books and games and, stuff over like the last 15 years on it, not my entire career, but a lot of good stuff there. Perfect. You can also find me on Twitter at mforbeck on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook as Forbeck as well. So not too hard to find. Just pop my name into Google or on Amazon, and you'll see boatloads of things come up.
Pop up right in the front.
It's one of the benefits of having a fairly uncommon last name, so it helps.
Yes, indeed. Well, Matt, thank you again for spending the time tonight, and as always, everybody that's watching, if you guys have not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you do get updated when we do go live next time. And if everybody's out there still watching, keep scaring, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks, Matt.
Guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.